Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I will try to offer a different perspective to managing change, given the new challenges we face today, like the pressure to go digital, more value add for less, while adhering to stricter KPIs. We turn to innovation and digitalization, but it requires an investment in resource, money, and time. And as some of you may know, this could result in short-term loss in profitability. So, for today's topic, I share with you the concept of Jugaad. My presentation is in 3 parts. The first is about understanding Jugaad. The second are a few examples of Jugaad innovation. And finally, applying Jugaad in mobility. Jugaad is a Hindi word which means improvising effective solutions with limited resources for quick wins. Jugaad works on 3 key principles: being flexible, frugal, and inclusive. Flexible, it means re-looking at resources that you already have to see if you can use them more effectively. Frugal, low cost, and inclusive, working with those outside your industry because you never know where a good idea can come from. Here are a few examples of Jugaad in daily life: a scooter which is being reused as a wheat mill, or a plastic water bottle which is being used as a sprinkler. These are homemade innovations that we see every day. Now, for Jugaad on a larger scale. As part of Stanford University's course on entrepreneurial design, a group of students wanted to come up with an idea which would help prevent death in premature babies in developing nations. So, they invented an infant warmer called Embrace. It has a small pouch where you pour in hot water every 4 hours. It keeps the baby warm and costs 1% of hospital incubators. Let's travel to Brazil. Albert Moser wanted to bring light to villages that didn't have electricity. So he invented the Moser lamp. It's a bottle of water and a few spoons of bleach. With the help of sunlight and infraction, it produces 40 to 60 watts of light at night. This has been a huge success in Brazil, as well as in the Philippines, bringing light to thousands. It is known as 1 liter of light. The concept of Jugaad is just not Indian. It exists also in Kenya, China, Brazil, and France. There are patrons of Jugaad today that include corporate bigwigs like Carlos Ghosn from Renault Nissan, Ratan Tata from the Tata Group, and Mark Benioff from Salesforce, amongst others. Now for Jugaad in mobility. Could we be flexible, frugal, and inclusive? I thought, why not throw out some ideas and get us all thinking? How about using it for settling in services or relocation services? Could we use a low-cost technology like the QR code to explain effectively to assignees how to use and maintain home appliances so we could get that precious security deposit back? Could we stick a QR code on different home appliances? The assignee can scan it with his smartphone, and a short YouTube video starts with a demo. It's visual information that's available anytime and far more effective than a handbook of instructions. Now, about intercultural training packages. Could we, let's say, tie up with free walking tour companies and let them organize a 2-hour special intercultural tour about the city and its culture? It's 2 hours that we will not invoice for. The assignee can tip the free walking tour company that gets more footfall, and the assignee gets an experiential value-added learning which is out of the classroom. Similarly, being inclusive and working with those outside our industry, let's say, could we tie up with specialty supermarkets that cater to your assignee's demographic or nationality and ask them whether they would be willing to give discount coupons to your assignees, and in exchange, they could advertise on the relocation arrival kit or offer groceries for the relocation arrival kit. To conclude, Jugaad innovation does not replace structured innovation, it complements it. Jugaad is low cost, low tech, inclusive, and effective. If you would like to know more about Jugaad and how MNCs and entrepreneurs have used them, you could read this book from where I have taken examples and quotes. And after this session today, I hope to see some Jugaad innovation in the mobility industry. Thank you for your time.